Another episode of Funky Marketing Podcast. Today we have a special guest, Christine, who's gonna talk with us about a lot of interesting stuff. She's an award-winning marketer, also a fellow podcast host, creative copywriter, with more than I think around 13 years of experience.
That's it.
Christine, you're gonna prove me right or wrong. If I'm
It's all correct so far. Keep going. Keep going.
Nice, nice. Also, what I liked, she has worked with some nice companies, and I got a chance to meet a lot of great companies, a lot of big companies when I was doing the research that I didn't know of, and it's basically something that made me realize I need to improve my views of the world and how companies are working. But basically, she's been recognized as a storyteller of the year and has successfully led marketing teams for companies like Smartly.io, Celtra. Basically, just before the acquisition, if I'm
hmm
right.
Yeah.
And now she's day two in a new challenge as the head of marketing and growth at Shelf Influencer Marketing Agency,
hmm
and I'm excited to talk especially about that topic. So, what did I miss?
I think you pretty much nailed it professionally. One of the things that I always say or share in these types of interviews is I'm originally from Helsinki, Finland. I'm based in New York, but I grew up touring and traveling all over Europe. My dad is an Italian circus artist, and they are third generation artists on that side of the family, and that is probably the most interesting thing about me and has also brought me into this sort of creative world, even though I did not become a trapeze artist. I'm a little afraid of heights. So there you go.
Yeah, I think it makes two of us. Actually, I'm not afraid when I'm, above a lot of other stuff, very high. But I'm afraid if you are near me and you are near the edge or something like that. Yeah, I saw that. Those are really interesting stuff, and I
hmm
bet you had a really interesting childhood. Growing up and learning a lot of stuff, and basically just the world around you.
Yeah, I think for sure. So for us, we grew up almost in between these two different worlds. So navigating very, very different realities between, your regular, going to school in Helsinki, Finland, and just living a very normal life. But then about, I want to say like 3 to 4 months out of the year, all of the holidays, we would spend touring, Norway or Germany, France, Italy, all over Central and Southern Europe. And all of these, it's a very family based business. And so everyone who is in that world pretty much stays in that world. And so me and my sister were pretty much anomalies because I went to advertising and marketing, and my sister is actually, she owns her own accounting firm. And so we're like very different from each other as well, but decided to carve out a different path than that of an artist.
Yeah, I know how it goes. That usually it's a family business and
hmm
everybody goes, but you know, you went into creative things. I mean,
hmm
usually people perceive marketing as creative, even though it's
hmm
not only creative. But your sister becoming an accountant or
I
having an
know,
accounting
I
company,
know.
that's really
It's funny.
crazy. But tell me, we have one thing in common.
hmm
So I got a lot of awards in my previous life,
hmm
working in civil society organization, working with youth, Roma people, and those kind of things. And it gave me kind of a different view of the business world. Give value first, then the money will follow. But you also have like tons of awards. I've been going through your
hmm
website and like, okay, there's too many of them. So I have a question, which
hmm
is kind of something that a lot of people would ask somebody who plays sports. But uh, do you ever run out of room on the shelf for all these trophies?
Well, those trophies would sit at the agencies that I worked at and not in my personal home. I think I have one like behind me on that shelf. But yeah, I think I had a lot of success early on working at TBWA Helsinki, which was and still very much is today within the TBWA network. Again, it's part of Omnicom advertising group. the Helsinki office was pretty much the crux of digital innovation and social first
Mhm.
work very early on. And I was very fortunate to be part of clients and teams and working under creative leadership that was just pushing boundary defining work. So I no means can take credit for all of those awards. I was a part of it, and it kind of shaped me who I am as a storyteller and a creative. But yeah, it very much was a being in the right place at the right time, and then also being able to contribute to that.
Yeah, but I think, also with the background in the agency world, it's all, you're always a part of the team, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as you carry on, you need to take the legacy because you were a part of all these campaigns and an important part of it.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's a bit of a mix of both, right?
Exactly. So, taking that, so you've been a leader, a storyteller, a podcast host, a part of the circus family. So I have a question regarding in the times that we live in. So growing
Mm-hmm.
up in a low income neighborhood in
Mm-hmm.
Helsinki, moving stateside,
Mm-hmm.
or navigating the basically wild world of influencer marketing,
Mm-hmm.
what's been more hard?
Oh man, I think the hardest part of my career, I feel like once I got my foot in the door in advertising, I literally I woke up one day and I said to myself, I'm going to become a creative copywriter. And once that sort of door opened at an agency, it was quite smooth from there for a long time, at least the first 5 years of my career in Helsinki. But then moving to the US was definitely the toughest part of that journey because, again, it took me a good year and a half to move here. I had maybe 40 different interviews. And anyone who's in this market knows, and especially if you've immigrated here, um, you have to convince the company or the agency to sponsor your visa. And it's a very costly and not an easy process. And so being able to move here meant that I had to also take some or make some sacrifices in what I wanted to do. I actually moved into ad tech at that time, and that was one of my first roles in on the sort of like in-house B2B marketing teams. And it definitely was a watershed moment in that I had to reinvent myself, learn a completely new skill set, and come into a market where nobody knows who I am. Nobody cares about the work that I've done for, European brands or international brands in the European market. And then having to build out that sort of path from the agency world into the ad tech world, startups, creative technology, and then ultimately making my way back into what I love the most, which is I love social media marketing. And more specifically, I love being part of the creator economy. And so right now, I feel like I'm very much like aligned with what I want to do.
Exactly, and especially when the way I see what's happening now is we had influencer marketing for years in B2C,
Mm-hmm.
and very much involved still, but it's now finally coming to the B2B. So like the two industries,
Mm-hmm.
two worlds are merging together.
They are.
I see also the social media platforms following that. Like we have dot leadership ads on LinkedIn, then
Mm-hmm.
YouTube is launching the possibility to retarget any video, no matter if you are creating that one or somebody else is, which will change a lot the game.
Oh,
I don't know
that's
if you knew
interesting.
that it's from last week.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah, no, and I think in like the influencers space is very much maturing, and we're kind of seeing the same curve that we saw back when, like, digital programmatic paid social first started. And I think what's really exciting about the space, and the reason also that I decided to join the shelf, is that because they're looking at influencer marketing more holistically than just a lot of brands still today may be treated more as a media buy. You're buying literally ad space in this
Yes.
influencer's feed, in their content. But where I think where smart agencies like the Shelf are really well positioned is that they're looking at social commerce as a whole, and the whole funnel from awareness to then driving sales, and how to integrate influencers into every single touch point. A lot of the work that they've done, they actually, when they work with brands, the content that they create is so high quality that it actually gets implemented on e-com sites of those brands as well. So you're seeing this sort of influencer led marketing kind of permeate through, and it's less about activating 20 influencers for a product launch. It could be that, but it is so much more. And I think it's only beginning, and it's a really interesting and exciting space.
Yeah, I totally agree. I see it from the podcast side as well, being part of a few different communities when, company basically doesn't work with just one creator, right? Or podcast host. They basically work with an agency or a person who can spread it to like 4 or 5 different hosts, different podcasts. And then it's always like that lava effect. I think companies realize that they have a power to do that. And it translates to, I don't know, LinkedIn posts, TikTok feeds, all kind of different stuff. But tell me, what do you think, like, from the brand side? I think creators realized, their chance and what's happening. But from the brand side, I think, the change is still not there yet. So, how do you see it? What are kind of like the steps you see it unfold?
This is my Roman Empire. How much time do you have? Because I could hijack this whole conversation and talk about this for the rest of the hour. No, but this was actually a talk that we gave with my podcast co-host Yanni and Melissa here in New York last week. So we were talking about the reasons that a lot of brands' social strategy and work is falling flat and why they are failing, and it is because, if you think about it, there aren't many marketing practices that have changed so fundamentally as social media and social media management. Now, if you look back a decade, a social media manager would take already ready approved brand assets, images, not even any video, and just write little captions, post them on social, maybe report back on what the community is saying, comments and things like that, and just trying to get the accounts to grow. And today, social media management is actually it's not a role, it is a practice that requires social commerce knowledge, e-commerce knowledge, paid strategy, creative strategy, brand building, awareness. It really is, it's the new fragmented mass media. It doesn't work like the mass medias of the past. And yet we're seeing, I think this year, Meta ad spend alone is going to surpass that of linear TV, just Meta. But still, in the C-suite, we're seeing a lack of senior leadership level knowledge of social. Some brands are doing this exceptionally well. I always like to quote Elf Cosmetics, because they've been a pioneer in TikTok and social commerce. And you've actually seen, you can kind of see how their shareholder and stock value has grown in lockstep as they have ramped up TikTok, which is insane. So I think that in order for brands to really be able to, I want to say not even die, because again, we're seeing a lot of legacy brands, like you've seen what's happening to Nike. They've really struggled because they haven't been able to adapt, and that is an iconic brand. So every brand is in danger, right, if you're not adopting to this new world. And so I think that, my hot take, my prediction is we're going to have chief social officers in the C-suite in 5 years. And a lot of these people who now have 8 to 10 years of experience in social specific roles, I think, well, first, they need more business exposure across you cannot just work in silos, because this is the most business critical part of your advertising. But then also, I think that brands need to start recognizing what kind of teams and knowledge they're building out at that level.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the example you give, I was thinking about Nike. I'll have a guest in a couple of weeks to talk exactly about that.
Great.
Etir was working in Nike for a long time, but they kind of recognize that they need to shift their marketing efforts to the younger audience, right? To the TikTok, Instagram, Reels, those kind of stuff. And when you look at the content over there, it's only related to the younger audience, and basically educating them for the future. But what I want to touch more is basically everything that you mentioned from the start, the knowledge somebody needs to have to manage the social. It just applied to one social media. Then you have another platform. Then you have another platform. So basically, you need a person to manage each platform, because they are not the same. You
Mm-hmm.
cannot just share one post to all the platforms and everything's good.
Mm-hmm.
Those times are kind of, changing, especially if you
Yeah.
look at like TikTok or Instagram versus LinkedIn, then versus Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of stuff are being presented different. We are consuming content different. So you need to know, to have a lot of knowledge about what's working over there to be able to create content. And then on the other side, you need to be deeply involved in the company to be able to transfer
Mm-hmm.
the story and the message and the narrative of the company.
Exactly. And I think it's not even so much as like maybe having one person manage one channel. I think you need to have more specialized roles within the teams, meaning that you have your creative, you have your strategy roles, you have your editor, you need to have a producer or a project manager. Then you can have your social media managers who can then
Exactly.
sort of be that glue kind of between all of these different functions. But again, we're still seeing a lag in investment. And I think it's on both sides because it's a lot, it feels a lot safer for a Fortune 500 brand to put in 1.5 million into a TV ad production, right? But imagine asking them for 1.5 million for always on organic social. These are the conversations that, me and my co-hosts like having brands all the time there. The investment is lagging, and it's partly because it's a world that is moving so fast that it's very tough to kind of come in and say, hey, if you invest this amount, these are the exact returns that you're going to get. You're going to have to build that over time, and that takes trust. And I also think that a lot of agencies don't know how to sell
Oh,
social content.
they
They're
have no idea how to sell their services at all.
and I think it's more because they're still approaching it also from the from the structures that they would sell integrated campaigns or TV production or those types of things. And you cannot have like 3 account people on a social only account. You need to have much leaner teams and much leaner production. But then also, so it's kind of like the chicken and the egg because um, brands need to invest more, but also agencies need to reinvent their services and how they structure teams in order for them to be profitable while delivering these services.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you add the AI and all those tools that we have today into the equation, and you get the total mess.
Oh, for sure. But there's a lot of opportunity there, though, as well. Like I think it's still a growing practice, and I think what we're going to see is I mean, there are a lot of social first agencies that are doing very well already. Movers and Shakers come to mind. I think Mischief is doing a great job on that front as well, and and then obviously the influencer led agencies like The Shelf. But I do think that going to be there's going to be a wave of these sort of social first creative professionals that have grown up within this, but then also have that classical concept experience. And they're going to go on and found new agencies that are going to work completely differently. And then those agencies, I think, are going to get bought up by the big holding companies. And so the circle continues, right?
Exactly. I mean, it's interesting to look at those shifts and how things are moving. Um, but I definitely think the way platforms are developing and the way they are adding possibilities for creators to kind of charge,
Mhm.
utilizing different brands from their own profiles and channels.
Mhm.
I think that's one of the things that kind of gives the security for the brands that they will deliver the content to the right
Mhm.
audience, or they can make sure that it spreads as they would
Mhm.
like it to do.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I think so. I think the challenge with influencer marketing is that, there are a lot of tools and AI and platforms that are promising the automation of that process. And while some of the areas of that workflow can be made much more efficient, but it's still going to be a person to person engagement. And this is why any creators that are getting brand deals on the regular are typically represented by these different talent agencies, and so you're actually brokering deals through the agency. And there is very little standardization today for how
Yes.
much an influencer will charge. Some of them can charge like 10x the amount another influencer will with the same audience. Like they just might be having a really great 3 months on TikTok and everybody's like interested in them. And so there's always going to be a level of person to person engagement in terms of negotiating fees and contracts and briefing the creators, because you cannot just send a document to a creator and say, hey, go like create something great for a brand. I believe, and a lot of the best influencer marketers that I know, that the way that they approach it is that they build relationships with these influencers. They take their time to really having the influencer be immersed in the brand and understand the brand, so that they can come in and almost like work like a creative partner to the brand, versus just like being, again, that media buy.
Yeah, I love that part. I love that part. But tell me, let's go a little bit into the storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
So, what makes actually a great brand story today?
So I think what I'm a huge fan of is, I know that everybody's sort of pushing this like jump on different trends and do whatever is like sort of trending on the For You page on TikTok, but I think a lot of brands are losing themselves in that, because I'm a huge fan of building a what I call a singular point of view. What is, again, like, you can as a brand be many things and you can do many different things, but if it needs to still come within the framework of what is your point of view as a brand. And that needs to then sort of like live within the Venn diagram of like, this is your point of view and this is what your audience cares about. And so I think it really, and we're seeing like in specifically in terms of social brand strategy, like successful brands are really making their audiences the starting points, but really then being able to translate their sort of their brand core in different, almost like shades, or like it's the same story in different fonts. That's the best way I can describe it for different audiences.
Exactly. I think you kind of got to the answer of what would be my next question. It is how to maintain the consistency,
Hmm.
because we have this urge to be everywhere, to
Hmm.
do everything, as we get
Hmm.
notification from all sides, and we see different brands, our
Hmm.
competitors, do a lot of different stuff, and then I think a lot of brands are kind of getting lost, and not following what's their narrative, how
Hmm.
they are telling their story.
Yeah. So, going back to this, and again, this was brilliantly explained by my co-host Yanni last week when we were speaking here in New York. We touched upon brand strategy and creating social brand strategy in specific. One of the challenges that we see a lot as creatives and marketers is when we start working with new brands, is that, okay, you've won the pitch, and now the request is, can you start implementing this new approach immediately, right? Like, we need 20 pieces of content for this month, like yesterday. And so what's happening is, I think that more brands should take the time, the same way, like, if every brand marketer, if you have to define a new brand platform, let's say, for example, my husband worked on the IBM Smarter Planet brand platform. I believe that project was like probably year or more. These are long term, and I'm not saying take a year to define your social strategy, but I think more brands should take the time to really in detail create a strategy that mirrors the audiences that they're trying to reach, and then creating workflows where you have sort of your North Star. And I have a great example for this. Jacquemus, that is a fashion brand. They're very, very successful on TikTok, and they never jump on trends. They don't have this sort of lo-fi UGC type content. Their point of view is creating these almost like magical realism pieces, where the clothes, the bags are always integrated in some like fantastical CGI type content, and people love it. And that's all they do. And that takes obviously money, it takes time. But again, it is having sort of your North Star and sticking to it. And then you need to define whether you are a brand that from time to time you might jump on a trend or two. Like, for example, Jules Lebron, the demure creator. I've seen especially some of the first brands that were kind of quick to jump on that, like, for example, Patrick Ta, it's a makeup brand. And so it made perfect sense for them to create where the founder is in videos with Jules. But that might not be right for Jacquemus. They would never do that. So again, it's as important to define what you won't do as well as what you will.
Yeah, that's I didn't think of that. And it's usually, I think it's not that uncommon to not to think about it. A lot of people, a lot of companies don't forget to think about what shouldn't we do, right? And I think especially having experience working with procurement brands or finance or those kind of
Yeah.
things, like you have a lot of limitations, right?
Hmm.
What can we share, what can you talk about, and most of the things, most of the answer that you will get when you ask is no.
Hmm.
So if you don't add the guardrails right from the start, you will get lost easily
Hmm.
and you won't be able to do anything. So I usually ask, what's the strict yes, what's the strict no. I can operate in between and be creative.
I think that should be asked within every social workflow as well.
Exactly. But tell me, let's add something that you and I are both passionate about to all this brand
Hmm.
story. The role of these kind of things. You
Hmm.
you mentioned production as part of the marketing team and a part of the
Hmm.
brand and story and everything else. So how's the these kind of things? How are they are changing? Because let me give you just a perspective from which I'm
Hmm.
asking.
Hmm.
Like Google is moving into becoming something that wherever people typing, AI will give them the answer.
Hmm.
But then we have YouTube, who is jumping into being potentially the number one search platform.
Hmm.
And on YouTube, it's not enough to be just educative.
Hmm.
To have this kind of video, you need to also have the entertainment, and I
Hmm.
think that will be a challenge for a lot of brands,
Hmm.
because you're competing with everybody, not
Hmm.
just with like podcasters or other things. So,
Hmm.
what I'm asking is, what do you think is the role, or how can podcast or these kind of different types of shows help brands, tell their story the right way, maybe differentiate from the others?
I think again, it's like I think it's less about channel specific strategies, and it's more about again like taking that time to really craft that singular point of view that you know is going to resonate. I have a great example of that. One of my favorite hair care brands, Color Wow, which is founded by the celebrity stylist Chris Appleton. I am obsessed with their TikTok content, and all they do is show the products in action, because their products, again, like their sort of USP is whatever they promise for the product to do, it actually does it. And I have the products and I can attest to that. But their videos are just about that. If it's a volumizer spray, it's 15 seconds of showing that spray, that product in action. They link it directly to their TikTok shop. They do TikTok lives to push out special deals, and that's it pretty much. That's all I see on the feeds. It's not entertaining. It's not telling me it's not telling me an unnecessary story, but it's because, again, they have a product that actually works, right? So it's, again, easier to market something that does what it promises, whether it's B2B, whether it's SaaS or a consumer product. But I do think that, again, as brands are sort of navigating this new sort of even the search landscape, right? For example, last week I went to buy a hair mask in the drugstore, and the first thing I did before stepping in, I actually not Googled, I looked up on TikTok reviews on best drugstore hair masks, and so I think that it's more about looking into your search strategy and making sure that sort of where you would have previously done SEO optimization or just that keyword play, you actually need to do that with content now. And so you need to define those and then create content against it, and just make sure that that is, again, mirrored through the lens of your brand.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, basically stick to what do you do well,
Mm-hmm.
talk about that, and then
Mm-hmm.
just maybe change the narrative a little bit, or the way you're telling the
Mm-hmm.
story, those kind of
Mm-hmm.
things, just so you have some sort of fresh view of the things, but you are definitely still talking about the main thing. Keep main thing the main thing. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's I
Yeah.
think the right words.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so let's get a little bit back and talk about two of the brands you were working with, Smartly.io and
Yeah.
Celtra. if I understood well, they
Mhm.
were all both acquired.
Yes, yes, they were.
So tell me a little bit about, I think a lot of listeners would like to know what's the atmosphere in the company
Mhm.
before the acquisition.
Mhm.
From somebody who works in marketing, in brand, and those kind of things. Is it exciting? Do you need to prepare some of the things? How are things from that perspective?
I mean, it is an incredible feeling just because again, when you join a high growth company, and especially during that time that I worked in Martech, it very much was the sort of lots of VC, PE investment in those areas. You were seeing a lot of those unicorn acquisition. It was a very exciting space to be in. But for me, when I found out about both acquisitions, it's just so much validation as a marketer, knowing that the story that you built out there or helped build in the market was actually something that, it worked. It resonated with the buyer, it resonated with the market, and it got you to that end result. Now, for example, at Smartly, and those two brands, Smartly and Celtra, those two companies, they're very different acquisition stories in terms of what we needed to do marketing wise. So for Smartly, I believe that the reason that they built their ad buying platform very early on in Europe, um, during a time where Facebook's ads or business manager was very clunky. It kept crashing all the time, and so they were able to instantly add value to that very early on. So they were able to build the European business off of that sort of like, when you catch the wave at the right time. The product was great, but you caught the wave at the right time. But what really became the sort of DNA of the brand was, and there was a joke at that time at Facebook, now Meta, that at any given time there was a Smartly in one of the Facebook offices working on something. So they really integrated themselves with Meta, but then also they had this ethos of really serving their customers in a way that wasn't perhaps very typical for ad tech or even in the sort of digital advertising industry. And that's why they were able to grow so rapidly. And now, so when I joined the company back in 2017, I first joined as the head of content and then moved on into an integrated marketing role. They were 9 people out of a WeWork in New York City. And by the time I left, the company was probably like 600 people. And so we experienced very rapid growth. But the challenge was we were going against a lot of brands that were already super known in the US market, like Nanigans, like those types. And we were an unknown. And so we had to go from like zero awareness and build that to then becoming the sort of the market leader in paid social automation. And I think one of the things that we did really well was we were very, very laser focused on educating the customer, because during that time, paid social and especially performance marketing was so new. We actually had engineers, product managers, account managers, strategists writing blogs every single week that we would then pick up and pull into automated paid advertising streams that would then get targeted to the brands that we wanted to work with. And that was incredibly effective. But then also sort of that brand ethos of always putting the customer first, always working closely with Facebook, that was something that they were able to also implement very quickly. So the brand was built not just by marketing, it was built by every single person who was there at the Meta offices, who were serving, giving that client experience. And that allowed them to really rapidly grow and take the market leader position in the US. And that then attracted the buyers ultimately as well. So that was an interesting one where it was almost like a customer first brand built through every single employee in the company. And for Celtra, it was a little bit of a different story, because Celtra had been around for a while and they had technology to create the ad placements and then manage the creative within media sites. So let's say like Condé Nast, like CNN, those types. And they wanted to build out a creative automation platform for brands to scale their banners and digital video. And so we had to actually not only split the code base into two separate products, but launch the creative automation platform to the market that knew this company as a publisher platform. So it was a complete brand repositioning. And so we spent several years building out Celtra's story as the creative automation company. And we did a lot of like really bold marketing stunts. Like, for example, one year we branded the Cannes Lions carpet with over 100 out of home placements. So we took that over. I actually launched a podcast there called Brand Side, where I interviewed brand and creative leaders. And so it really was a sort of shifting that message and that story in the market, which is one of the hardest things to do. And that kind of then ended up being successful. And they were acquired for the creative automation platform that they build and the brand as well.
Yeah, I love how you basically describe how you do, basically get the same goals, but do it in a different way,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I always love to hear those stories, especially coming from the challenger brands, because you always need to, get your hands dirty, and you don't have the biggest budget in the world, and you need to make sure that you do some things differently.
Mm-hmm.
Because you cannot play the same game as the bigger guys who are here for years.
No, no. And that's also like it's a fun part of being a challenger brand too, because I think having a huge marketing budget, again, you have to have sufficient marketing budget. You cannot play with $0, especially US market. Like it's like they're not gonna even open the doors for you. But I think when you are limited in what you can spend, like you cannot be, if you're not the market leader and you don't have like crazy VC money to spend, I think a lot of money in marketing makes you lazy sometimes.
I agree.
Because then it's like, oh, I'm going to be the title sponsor at all these marketing conferences, and that's all I'm going to do. Again, like if there's one thing, and I want to shout out my former manager from Billion Dollar Boy, actually, Becky Owen was the CMO. It's one, if she taught me one thing, it's like having an original perspective to the business, to the industry that is at the same time, it's like it's unique, but it's also helpful, and crafting that. There's no money that can buy you that. Like you actually have to do the legwork.
Yeah, I love how she's thinking about the
Mm-hmm.
things, and I can relate to it. And I think you can also, looking at your childhood and all the things. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I'm growing up in Serbia where we have civil wars. We were bombed by the US, a lot of different stuff. So you learn how to be creative.
Mm-hmm.
You
For
know,
sure.
I don't like to complain and talk about the things. I leave Djokovic for that to talk about, the childhood and how he need to be creative, those kind of things. But you rarely work with a big budget. So you learn how to be, nitty gritty and use
Mm-hmm.
things and get the most out of every channel, every action, every project that you invest in.
Yeah, and it also makes you a little bit more critical in terms of like where you invest in. Again, I
Exactly.
do believe that marketers have to have the freedom to experiment and also fail, because again, like especially when you're like either entering a new market or you're trying to enter a new customer segment, the only way for you to get to success is through like you're not going to get it right the first time. Not every message is going to resonate. Not every conference sponsorship is going to bring you leads. But I think just like sort of finding your own way, like again, requires investment, but also at the same time, like you just need to really be thoughtful of how you spend it.
Yeah, so I have one thing that I'm always thinking of, especially in the times when I'm not going to ask you what's next or those kind of things, because usually people talk about AI, talk about different stuff.
Yeah.
But I like to see if we have the same perspective or we,
Yeah.
we think about things the same way. Usually, when we talk about those things, I go in reverse and I said, let's first nail the foundation,
Mm-hmm.
because usually the biggest problems that we run into, complex problems, have the solution in setting up the foundation,
Yes. Yeah.
right? And especially now with the AI, with everything coming up, companies don't have set up their data the right way. You cannot use AI tool if you don't do that, if you don't set up the foundations, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and I think for me, it's also again, this is like I'm less interested in the AI conversation from the point of view of like the first wave was like how will it disrupt creative work and creators, and sort of like we're all going to just read AI powered everything, and I actually don't think that's the case, because again, like if you look at even the creator space, like virtual influencers, like yeah, they pop up here and there, and some brands have been successful in pulling little stunts, but I would not follow a single virtual influencer. I
Yeah.
follow real people for their rawness, for their imperfections. And then I also think that, again, like, especially like if I take a step back, look into the B2B world, it is very much a people business. And I think some of the most successful marketing strategies today have got nothing to do with AI. For example, I'm building up partner programs. Now I'm looking at how I can partner both with megatech, but also with smaller players in our industry that are non-competitive. How can we bring people together? People are craving experiences, in-person engagement. All of those things cannot be automated. And so then like I'm interested in how I can leverage AI to just get me to those places faster. But still for me, especially as like, I'm a writer true and true. Like whenever I need to write anything in my own voice, like I haven't written a single LinkedIn post with ChatGPT, and I will not, because I need to say it in my words. But I have written summaries for, research and things like that in ChatGPT that don't see the light of day. They don't go external. So again, it's just a tool.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm looking at from my standpoint. Sometimes I use ChatGPT to kind of give me the structure, for example, or those kind of things.
Exactly. Yeah.
Good to replicate things. If I already have the framework, I do
Yeah.
the strategy the certain way, or the research. I want to use it to kind of get
Mhm.
more into that. But I totally agree with you, and I think that's why we are still going to the offline conferences to meet eye to eye with people. And then I think the online world is just the continuation of that. Do we
Mhm.
represent the same person online?
Mhm.
You know,
Exactly. Yeah. And if you look at even like, I think Cannes Lions had its record attendance here
yeah, 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 yeah.
this past June. So it's like we're not going anywhere. And so I think the alarmists, obviously, like very divisive opinions always get a lot of airtime. But yeah, I think it's all evening out.
Yeah, totally. Anything that I didn't ask you and you want to talk about?
Well, I'm just going to plug our podcast here, House of Content, because we just came out with season 4, and so the same talk that we gave at Future last week, it's broken into part 1 and part 2, and part 1's already out, and part 2 is going to be out on September 12th, so in 2 days at the time that we are recording this. And yeah, give us 5 stars, please. Please follow our show. We're still very much a growing little podcast, and so yeah, very excited to dive into season 4.
Yeah, I will add it in the show notes. Make sure to
Wonderful.
follow. Also, make sure to where's the best address
Connect
to
with me on
follow you?
LinkedIn. Yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn. That'd be
LinkedIn.
great.
Also, you have a website.
Yeah, it's christinegoos.com. That's more for the past work that I've done, but I'm very active on LinkedIn, and so yeah, I would love to find the community there.
Perfect. Now, guys, it's the time when I tell you to go back to the beginning of the podcast, listen everything again, stop when you hear something interesting. If you have questions, jump to Christine's LinkedIn, send her a message. I'm sure she's willing to respond.
Yep.
Um, one more thing. What's next for you? 2 days into the company, what do you see happening?
Well, I think I'm going to be spending the fall at a lot of conferences, both here in like New York City, hopefully also elsewhere, and really just getting neck deep into the creator world. That's what's next.
Love that. I'm sure you will write about it and we
I
will
will.
read a lot of stuff about it. Okay, guys, thank you for listening. One more episode of Funky Marketing Show. Christine, thank you for being here with us, spending an hour and talking about all these things. And for all of you, as I always say at the end of the episode, make sure to follow us. If you're not already, give us a review. As Christine said, also give them a review and keep it funky.